Greetings, you fellow viewers, and welcome to the vlogcast. Of course, I am your host, SeptumSin. I went ahead and threw on, because we were kind of running behind with our pickups video, but you should check it out. It says coming out in a couple of days. It's really some spectacular stuff. But we are on our 7th episode of Anime Anticlimax. So that's going to be really fun. And we're waiting on Jake. All right.
Okay.
So this time we are doing a really awesome one, and this one was Mo's pick, so I'm going to actually hand it over to him. I will be taking a brief break while y'all discuss things, so I'm going to find an opportunity to run and grab food. But I will hand it to you.
Alrighty. Today we are going to be discussing School Live, or Gakko Garashi, as it's known in Japan, which is just literally translated as living at school. And this is based on a manga series that ran between May 24th and from May 24th, 2012 to November 22nd, 2019. Quite a bit larger scale than the anime we're dealing with here, though, weirdly enough, it was 12 volumes, and this, series adaptation is 12 episodes. It was directed by Ando Masaomi, I don't know how to say that. Jake had probably done a better job.
Masaomi Ando.
Yeah, there you go. It was produced by a bunch of other Japanese people. It was written by Norimitsu Kaiho, and it was done by Lurch, or Lurche. I don't know how to say that either. That's the studio that put her together. It's licensed by Sentai here in the States. That's how I think all of us got our sets. And it ran between July 9th of 2015 and September 24th of 2015, day before my birthday. It ended. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. So
the director also of this highly acclaimed series that I'll have to watch one of these days.
Nice. Definitely be interested in checking that out.
Yep.
So I guess we'll start with you, Jake. What was your first impression of this show, briefly?
Okay. Well, and just so y'all can get a nice little visual, we got the really nice, super fancy edition. And to be honest, this was part of the reason this one even came up in conversation, because I've had this sitting on the shelf for some time now. I'd actually read about the series. I don't remember if I read about it when it was airing. I think I did, but I know I read about it when it came out on physical release. It got pretty solid praise on ANN. And then I added it to my list. I was like, I collect these things obsessively. And I probably ended up getting it in much more than any of these fellows did, because it is now affordable for this set. But it is I had not actually seen it. I was a little bit nervous because it's a zombie-themed show, and that's not always a good thing for me, but it's also a slice of life high school girl club anime. Which I have enjoyed quite a few of those. And I was intrigued by that weird mashup, and I wanted to see how it played out. And incidentally, I apologize. I probably just went ahead and gave that first spoiler without giving anyone advance warning. But honestly, at this point, I think most people know that it's kind of a zombie-themed show.
Yeah,
but
we're going to wreck this for you guys. So if you If
you
want to avoid that, get on High Dive, pull out your set, watch the first episode right now, then come back to this. And
if you don't have it, get
at least.
If you don't have it, get on High Dive.
Only $5 a month, I think. So not too bad. So I take it. Go ahead.
What's up?
Oh, I was just going to say, I take it you enjoyed it then.
My first impression was pretty solid. I enjoyed it when that first reveal happens, even though I saw it coming. When it actually hit, I was like, damn.
Yeah.
and there were a couple of other things that I saw coming, but when they happened, it hit. It was effective. And then, the last couple of episodes get pretty damn emotional. And I was like, I like this show.
It's good, man. They do a good job of lulling you into
Yeah.
a sense of comfort and then punching you directly in the throat with a fistful
Exactly.
of dread. And
Oh, yeah.
So I guess we'll move on to you there, Brandon. What was your first
Okay.
impression of this bad boy?
So I had kind of dismissed it because of the cover art for a long time, because it was always going for dirt cheap. And also, hello, Animazing. Glad to have you with us on this. I hope you also have enjoyed this wonderful series. But speaking of, we're going to be covering some major spoilers that I think hit best if you have seen them prior to us discussing them. So do note that as we go. And we even kicked Dave off because he was planning on discussing it right away. But it was one of those I just kind of just was like, oh, just another kind of school, a cheery schoolgirl anime. And then I finally read the summary. Somebody was talking about it. I think it was on Animazing because they have a lot of cool things that they discuss on there. And great group of people, by the way.
Indeed.
See, okay, then good. He's
that Roger.
Yes.
I love that Roger. He's a good dude.
So, so yeah, and good. He has seen it. See, that. So he doesn't have to worry about that spoiler being hurt.
Right.
But any case, I didn't know what I was getting into until I read the back. I was like, oh, okay, I have to get this. So I had it on DVD, and then you actually, Mo, you were talking it up, and then Sentai did this huge sale on that awesome premium.
It is nice.
I was like, okay, this is dirt cheap. I'm adding this because this sounds like a really good series, and I would be upset if I didn't have a really cool thing of it. And I'm glad I did because I was very pleased with it. I didn't care as much for the other zombie anime I watched, which was High School of the Dead. I was worried they were going to do something similar to this and make it mostly, ecchi boobies and stuff like that with zombies in the background.
But, like that.
They
bunch
did
of
have
DNA and subpar Romero worship. No, that's not what's going on here.
They did have some. They did have some of it, but not as much. And I was able to get around it because I do understand how they spaced it. So I was very pleased with it. And hopefully Dave will be back with us in the future.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll go ahead, Jake. What were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, while we're waiting on Dave, one more little spoiler, which you guys can tell me if I'm wrong. But this set is pretty awesome, except for one little thing that I found yesterday that disappoints me. It does come with a soundtrack. And I've played the first disc, and the first disc is solely background music. And as far as I can tell, the second disc doesn't have any of the themes either. And the opening theme to this is great. I love it.
Yeah.
It's so catchy and pop. It's a total earworm, but it's a lot of fun. And it's called Friend Shitai, or I Want to Be Friends. And the last one has there are three ending themes. And it would have been great if they'd included those on the soundtrack.
For sure.
And
I mean, lots of music is great.
Sentai has a weird track record when it comes to that. Like Akame ga Kill, they had 2 full CDs of background music, but they did include the themes. But most of theirs don't have soundtracks, and those that do, some have the themes, some don't. And I have 2 regular edition Sentai titles, Dusk Maiden of Amnesia and Crozet in a Foreign Labyrinth, where they actually have the background music and the themes as a bonus disc, or bonus discs. And I'm like, so why not shoot for the fences every time? It's like
I would have to wonder if it's not a licensing thing.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure
some of these people are probably up and coming pop stars or some shit, and they want like royalties as if it's a single, and it's like, well, it's just really the bumper to 25 minutes of animation, man. I mean, it's a great song, but I don't know if I'd want to pay you extra for that either. We already paid you to make it. I was supposed to give you royalties every time the shit's on TV or something. Well, I guess that is kind of how that works.
It is.
Anticlimax does that too with their soundtrack.
Yeah,
they don't give you what you really want.
I'm gonna actually just walk back everything I said there because I was like, "Fuck the artists." No, they should probably get paid. Fair enough.
Yep, I will let Dave do his opening because. By the way, Animazing does say that the opening gradually changes from cute graphics to very dark graphics.
Yes.
Not many anime do something like this. Yes, there are a lot of subtleties and a lot of little Easter eggs that are amazing in this series, and it was well worth a second watch, which I did do.
Oh yeah, lots of stuff they didn't have to do either, like super subtle little things that are real nice watching back through it again, especially with headphones on.
If Dave, I had the time,
what is your first impression of the series?
So this was my first time watching the series. I do not own it as of yet, but it was an interesting watch, to say the least. I mean, it did have some When They Cry vibes to me because of the whole club thing. Because even though these were all girls in a high school, zombie apocalypse was going on. My biggest gripe with this was the fact that Yuki was so goddamn annoying.
I mean, it depends
75% of the film. There is no reason why she should be that annoying.
I didn't really take it that way. I mean, I quite enjoyed the character, even because I had to watch it the first time English dub because I was watching it with my kid. She's 10. She can do the reading, but she prefers not to. So, we just let it play with the English dub. And while the character is pretty grating, I think she does a good job still in that dub of putting across. Go ahead. No, go ahead, Dave.
I enjoyed her character more later on. I enjoyed her character more later on.
And I thought the voice actress did a good job of getting that innocence across. Right. I don't know. I took to her quicker, but I did prefer in the Japanese dub, as I think should be the case for most people. But because it's just the characters are a little more subtle, I think, over there, which tends to be the case. The Japanese they get wild with it sometimes, but when it's necessary, I feel like most of the time. Whereas I guess our American voice actors tend to ham it up a little bit more. So that comes across in the dub for sure. This time I watched the Japanese dub, and it was enjoyable for sure. So I'd recommend both. I've seen it through a good 4 times now at this point. Outside
I wish I had made time. I wish I had made time to do the English dub.
The series does have some depth to it, so it's not like I'm saying that it was a totally annoying experience. I just had a hard time getting into it because of her. And over time, watching some anime, I tend to gradually gravitate towards anime that has some soothing sounding voices.
Right. Yeah, you'd probably benefit from taking a trip back through her on the Japanese dub eventually, because I think you'd.
We need to make sure that we get Dave to watch Cromartie High School, because they straight say multiple times that Ebizawa has a very soothing voice.
I might have to do that as my choice for the next one, because that would be there are a lot of them. I thought about Slayers or Cromartie or something like that.
Right.
So when Dave's choice is done, I might have to wend on that. But this is some. I'm sorry, I missed most of your stuff. I had to grab food.
Oh, no worries, man. You gotta eat. So I mean, outside of go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, as far as the idea that Dave put forward of the character, and I guess we'll get into this more when we actually hit the characters, but just as a talk at the beginning, I think part of the effectiveness, Dave, maybe it wasn't as effective for you being a little less familiar overall with anime and with the tropes of anime. But a lot of these characters kind of do fit certain archetypes that are very common. And Yuki definitely is the ditzy airhead type, which is full of energy and cheerful and happy, and you know, she definitely fits. But one of the cool things about it is a character type that I often do find annoying. I will say, some of the others I find very, like Ri is more of the, she's sort of the older sister character, but she has that quality where she can scare you with her stare. And I've always enjoyed characters like that, but they are all a little deeper. They're not stock characters, but at first they look that way because that's the way this series sets you up. It sets you up to think, oh, it's another cute high school anime.
Exactly. Yeah. They lure you in there with this sense of like familiarity with all of it, and they just beat you down. I pretty much blind bought this, man. I was probably taking bong. I didn't even know it was a zombie thing. I was probably just taking bong hits like I was usually do during those Sentai sales and just adding things to the fucking cart after briefly looking at it for a second. And I was like, you know what? I've been buying a lot of these club shows. Just throw it in the cart. Who cares? And then I got it, and so I went into the initial twist and everything of this totally blind. I knew that there was like monsters or something because I bought also that Okami Kakushi Mask of the Wolf or whatever, and a couple others that are kind of like from another world. I think is one like where it sounded like the whole vibe of it was that their world is normal, but there's something sinister like bubbling underneath the surface, kind of a thing. With this, it's festering right on the top after you get through that first episode there. But yeah, that the twist was really effective, and immediately it kind of hooked me into it. I do agree with Dave that Yuki is super grating, especially at first in the English dub. I will say that lady still does a good job of like putting across the emotion in the character later on. And I've heard her in a couple dubs then, so it's certainly a voice you'll never forget, Dave. But you know, it's just I had to immediately just binge through this thing like as soon as I saw that initial twist and had no regrets. You know, I watched it, like I said, this was my third time since, and I doubt that it will. Go ahead.
I've been through it in about 3 hours on Thursday when I was sent home from work. So it was entertaining. I mean, it's not the first thing I would probably gravitate towards, but because it has the zombie apocalypse going on in the background and the darkness that comes along with it, and that's why I think that When They Cry was similar, maybe because of the government cover-up of the that we'll go into later on with the disease or whatnot. So
right.
Well, I will say Animazing. It is an interesting thing for the dub. The voices are slightly different in how they do it and how they come across, but they generally get the feel right because I watched it both.
Yeah.
And reading the manga is cool too. I wish I had started with the manga.
Manga goes way further,
I need to read it
like
one of these
expands
days, I'm sure.
a bunch, I guess, because we do meet like the people at the college they talked about and stuff in the manga. So I actually didn't realize that.
I'm looking at the cast here. Brittany Karbowski is Yuki, who she's the one that did Wendy on Fairy Tail, and she's done a lot of other stuff over the years. She tends to be those kind of, I guess you could say, the brighter, kind of younger or peppier kind of characters, I think. A lot of you got a pretty good English cast overall here. You got Lucy Christian is Ri, Juliet Simmons is Kurumi, Cynthia Martinez is Miki, and then of course the original cast: Ari Orizawa, Inori Minase, Mao, and Rie Takashi. They're a little less well known overall. Strangely enough, Emily Kato is one of the better known ones in the cast for me, and that's the voice of Tarumaru.
And I will say this: given the character, she did annoy me, but that was the purpose. They wanted her to annoy you, just like you said. That they wanted to project this was like a high school anime, and it was just the archetypes that you've seen over and over and over again. Except for Dave, because you haven't watched high school animes like that a lot. But for her, once you get to the point where you see why she's as delusional,
like the kind of movies that come along with.
Roger, I agree more or less with that. Yeah.
But I do think that once you find out why she's as delusional as she is, it is. I got to like her character a lot more and understand her a lot more. And of course, the ending redeems her quite a bit.
Dude. I mean, there's a period of acclimation here, and then like once they do break open the depth of the thing, it takes off and is off to the races pretty quick with it. So you're seeing a fair amount of character development with all the characters, I think, pretty consistently throughout the episodes, But yeah, anyways, obviously it's clear I love this show, and I'm glad you guys have all enjoyed it to various degrees. I guess we're just gonna, the easiest way to probably run through this is to just sort of run through it almost like we would a movie. And then if we feel the need to come back and single out specific episodes as favorites or whatnot, we can do that as well. But go ahead.
Before we start, just to cover one more comment, and Amazing did say that he agrees it's When They Cry is an excellent example because it's similar structure with the beginning of each arc being lighthearted to become very dark at the end. Yuki is a tragic character with being innocent and being forced to see the grim truth.
Yes.
And back to you, Mo. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. But, before we dive through the plot here, I guess since we've already started on characters and I feel like we've covered Yuki pretty well, we might as well whip out the old school life notebook here and go through our other characters real fast. We got Kurumi Ebizawa is our next one in there. She's pretty kick-ass, tough character, She goes around with Mr. Shovel, just cracking domes and patrolling the school to make sure they're safe from all these zombies. She has, probably, maybe some of the least amount of fleshing out as far as the characters go. We basically just learned that she had this dude she had a crush on, and when all this shit kicked off, he got infected like right away, and she had to kill him up there in the rooftop garden. And so she just went around kicking butt. There she is, right there. I really like how she managed to find knee pads that match the color scheme of her outfit.
Right.
I just feel like the odds are they would just have regular knee pads, But cool. And then we got Miki Naoki, or Mikun, as Yuki calls her the entire time. She's the newcomer to the club. They found her at a shopping mall, which I'm sure we'll cover that whole bit of the show once we get to it. But she was introduced into the group. So she wasn't there from the beginning when they formed this club to kind of, help themselves stay occupied and not go insane, and to kind of help Yuki from going less insane, I guess you could say.
And I guess with her introduction, you probably do have to mention Tarumaru.
Oh, yeah, Taromaru. He is a very adorable little dog. I'm not sure what the breed of dog is there. They kind of meet him. Miki meets him at a shopping mall. We'll cover that when we get there. But, she ends up pissing him off. So a big part of her character development is her trying to get this dog to not hate her, And then we have Yuri Wakasa. She's kind of like the motherly member of the group, or Risan, as Yuki calls her. She does kind of fill that motherly role. She takes over for Magune after the tragic events, and she's. They let us pretty much know several times that she's got big knockers. It's a thing throughout the show. Then of course we got Magumi Sakura, or Megune. Megune, is their teacher and founding advisor of the school life club. She's kind of the teacher who's with them when all this. she's the lady who's just, happens to be with all these kids when it kicks off, and they end up being the only survivors of the school. So naturally, she tries to protect them best she can. And, that goes terribly wrong, as do a lot of things in this show. She is around in spectral form, if you will, as part of, either Yuki's delusion or she is an actual tangible ghost. I don't know. We'll discuss that later on in this. So I guess, it's a good point to just throw out favorite character if you guys got one.
Well, and you also have to mention Mr. Bear.
Oh, true.
A lovely mustache bear.
That little hair, antenna up there. I love it.
Comments from Animazing on characters. Let's see here. We go back. Yuki is a tragic character with being. We talked about that. Kurumi also ill. Miki's friend has a dark greeting with the group near the end. Poor dog, which is a spoiler we'll get to at the very end. Yuri has psychological issues, yes. Magumi really has a bad fate, yes, indeed. And Magumi might be a ghost to Yuki, yes. Actually, it is possible that she could be a ghost in general, I would think. But again, that was one of the first major twists. You kind of see it coming.
Yeah. Well, I saw it coming. I was just, it still hit hard, and that was, and we'll go ahead and I guess mention that since we're at it, that the series kind of starts off with everyone's already assembled, and the early hints that you get from the word "go" with Megune are that everyone's always commenting on her lack of presence. It's like, they keep overlooking her, and she keeps pouting of like, hey, I'm here, or something like that. And, there's, of course, the pouting where they always call her Megune, and she's the teacher, and she wants to remind them it's Sakura Sensei. But it's like, but if you really think about it, and when they have the big reveal, they pull like a little Fight Club moment where they show certain scenes now that you know the truth. But it's like, I had figured that she had was probably no longer with them, but I wasn't sure what the story was. And when you find the full story, it's pretty, tragic.
When they get to her episode, they hint a lot harder because it's kind of like she's writing her last will.
Right.
I had kind of thought about it, but but I'd still put it to the back of my mind the first time, so it sort of hit me as a surprise, and it still hit me emotionally when it was like, because I didn't want her to be dead. I wanted her to be alive with the group. I wanted to be wrong.
Yeah, and they give you the double whammy with it later on, which is just amazing.
And then you're right. It really was her episode where they started dropping hints right and left. And then they ended with that wonderful thing where they changed up the end theme, and they kept showing pictures of her with the group, and she was fading out of each picture. And it was like, I just love that. I was like, that was such a good ender.
They do a good job with it of having, like, for the first couple episodes, something's odd about their relationship with her, but you maybe aren't kind of sure. And then there's like an episode where you're pretty damn sure she's dead. And then, like, Brandon said, they eventually start just walloping you with it. And there's little things I didn't even notice before that I noticed this time, like during that whole lead up, like the part where she tries to hand her that water bottle as an apology. If you listen, you actually hear it hit the ground, like right there in that scene, and then later it shows it dripping. I don't know if I caught this stuff because I was wearing headphones this time or what, but then also when she tries to make her hold that boombox, and then she calls her senpai or whatever, you can hear the boombox hit the ground as like the effects come out, and you'd be forgiven for thinking that it was like just because of those screen effects, it was a sound to go along with it. But then they show the boombox broken, and it was playing before. It wasn't a delusion because Miki said, like, that's a waste of electricity. So it was clearly plugged in and playing when she first was holding it,
I didn't really catch that the first time, but there were things like little hints. Like there was certain things where, like, Yuki would be trying to fully interact with her, and Megune would be rebuffing it slightly, like where she tried to give her Mr. Bear in the mall. She's like,
Right.
"Oh, well, I already have one. You should hang on to that," and that sort
Yeah.
of like, so there were little hints there of where she would
Yep.
kind of keep her at somewhat at arm's length occasionally. But you're right. There were also moments where if I had paid more attention, maybe I would have caught it. Or if so I'm curious to go back and listen to that. But yeah, Animazing mentions that it's because it's from Yuki's point of view. Yes, that's one of the cool things about the show is and so yeah, a gradual reveal is the way to do it. Like when they go to the mall, they use that was another hint too, where Kurumi is driving, and they were all like, "Well, can you drive?" Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's
game
have some
pad,
video games.
Don't scratch
But
my
it was like
car.
but you get the feeling when you really sit and think about it, you're like, there's no way Ri would have let her drive if Megune was right there.
Oh yeah, or like when she's
about it.
hiding in the book stacks and they come and they find her, and they do a decent enough job there of playing it off like, oh hey, Magune, but she's totally not there. Like it is one of those things where even from the word go, she's dead the whole time, and once you've seen it and you go back and you look at it, it's awesome.
The whole time in the context of the show. In the actual chronology of the.
Before we get too far in, like we have, let's talk about the major plot twist, because the first one was the major plot twist, which was that we were in the zombie apocalypse, and you get to see. And this one was a plot twist that most of us knew out the gate. I don't think any one of us knew. I think all of us knew that there. Mo, did you say you? I
didn't know it was zombies. I knew that there was going to be like monsters or some shit. And then
I was looking hard for little hints on the first episode because I knew what it was about, and it started. You started to see little bits here and there. It's just sort of like when you see with her at the later on where she realizes this piece of window is broken, but you see like how her delusion is just when they first do the ping pong balls, they fall, or them making spaghetti in the room, or you'll see the first major hint that they throw right in your face is those desks lined up in the barricade, because you see that like right away early on.
Right.
It's
there's several bits where you see like in the background through the window people wandering around, and they're totally shambling around and shit, like and then they really drive it home up on the roof because they finally like show it in the playing soccer or whatever, but I feel like there was a couple moments of that too where if you're really looking you can see that no, that's not just generic stock like background anime wandering crowd shit, they're zombies for sure.
Because they really do a good job, as we said before in the first episode, of making you kind of feel that this is a warm, cheerful high school anime. That opening theme the first time around, there's nothing particularly dark in it. And I mean, it's very cheery. And one particular part I want to mention that I love that it changes with the second episode is the how the first show and Animazing says the environment gets dirtier and more broken as the show goes on. Well, that's specifically what I was about to mention. You get that one scene in the opener of Yuki running, and you see like a cutout of her silhouette, and it's like the little bubbles going by or whatever. And in the first episode, it's exactly the same as the background. But from the second episode on, her silhouette is perfectly clear and looks like a happy school life, and everything around it is not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
that was one of the early changes, and I love that. I was like, "That's a good." But
I mean, it's worth the rewatch alone just to try and pick up again on all the little Easter eggs.
Oh yeah, and the build up to that reveal is well done. Because not only do they reveal that she's in this delusion, but it also reveals how very, very close she is to totally her whole entire insanity just shattering. Because Miki starts questioning her about like, who the hell's Magune? what are you on about right here? And like, who are you talking to type stuff. And she's just like, what do you mean? You know, and then everything gets fucked, you know?
Well, actually, well, yeah, let's go ahead and mention like what's really going on with that. Like Yuki's in class, like she's actually taking class.
Yep.
And I think Taramaru gets out or something, and Miki was looking for her.
Yeah.
And she comes in, and Yuki chides her for interrupting class.
Yeah.
And then you get Miki just looks at her like, you know, and they keep busting in on all these classes, and Yuki keeps apologizing, and you get this sense that Miki's like, you know, just like not sure what to make of this whole thing. And then I think it was afterwards she came back, and that's when you got the reveal. I think it was where it was like they came back, they had set the seed of what Yuki was experiencing, and then they came back and showed it briefly from Miki's point of view, and that's when you're like, whoa.
I mean, that's one thing that was there. The delusions were so big. In the first episode, it was really hard to tell for the first time who was alive and who was dead entirely. If you paid real attention, you could. But, you know, some of the students, some of the interactions, there was a lot of depth.
With the stars.
Yeah. You know, I mean, as an amazing, I said, you know, it is awesome as it progresses and very deep. And yes, with little cracks showing. And yeah, she slowly starts to come to reality as the show goes on. You can see that. And of course, the first episodes are really all about character development. I think they hit all the main characters. They hold on our mall one until the end. But the one I thought that was a really good also ran when it comes to background was Sakura Sensei's, where you get to actually see the world pre-zombie apocalypse. You get to see a little bit of how things got to where they were, which was really cool.
Yeah, they hit it real good, like bang, bang, bang. You know, you pretty much get like, I think that's the first episode with the reveal, and then you get the one where it shows kind of how they all came together as it kicked off, and then you get the one with Magune, like pre-apocalypse, or that might have kind of been before that one. I don't remember if we got Kurumi's whole thing before or after that.
I think it was before that.
I think it was before. And then pretty much right after that is when they flip over to the Miki thing, where we learn how they got her. So they don't make you wait too long to find out.
Miki, I believe, was before, because again, when they went to the mall, they had not actually revealed.
It was after the mall. It was after the mall storyline that they revealed it, though. That was at the end of that storyline that they revealed. That she was really dead. Fully.
That's what I'm saying.
It was right before the mall.
So we're looking at Memories was the one where you kind of got the what happened, I think, with Kurumi and a little bit of the general overall that Memories and back then, and then Field Trip was going to the mall, and the meeting was and that was where you're also introduced to Miki's best friend Kay, who got trapped in the mall with her.
You get introduced to her again in the last episode.
Along with Taramaru. Like Taramaru was with this little old lady and ended up getting lost and ending up with Miki and Kay. And from the beginning, he was kind of friendly with Kay and standoffish with Miki. And then when Kay got fed up Kay basically gets fed up and leaves because, you know,
getting that
you're just hiding in here. Yeah.
And that was a really good touch. I mean, I don't know if that's been done too many times in zombie stuff where it's like they have a safe place, but one person is just like, look, I can't stay here. You know, we can't just wait in here to die. So I'm going to go. Whether or not you want to come with me is fine.
I feel like I've seen that a lot, but it's usually played off as bravado, or
Right.
it's just
It's a
plain
different
stupid.
kind of
like
thing.
they're going to die because they're stupid.
You gotta love
that
the
sort of thing.
you gotta love the homage of it being a mall.
Yes.
There, but yeah, when finally realizing why the dog does not like her, it made me really sad going back through and realizing when she would approach the dog and the dog would be standoffish to her, and then she would look sad, and I was just realizing why she was looking sad.
Yeah, it's tragic, dude. I mean, she didn't mean to tell him to shut up. She was losing her only other companion, or so she thought. But then she learned pretty quickly that you just lost your other one too. He's out.
Yes, I agree.
He did lead them back there, though. So Kurumi is really a good. When you think about it, he's the hero of the entire show.
Oh yeah,
he saved Mickey, and then later on, if he hadn't interceded when Yuki was getting messed up there for a minute, she wouldn't have been able to make that announcement. So they'd all likely be dead if it wasn't for that little dog.
And as an amazing put out, the his owner gets eaten. What an end, indeed.
I think she was eating someone, actually.
That's true.
I think they did see her eating someone, Well,
she's about to eat them until they barricaded themselves in that storeroom. See, I don't know how... Well, I mean, lots of stuff happens right there. I don't know how anybody would have had time to barricade all those people in the movie theater. That's another cool scene that I've seen in several zombie things. Is, the whole, you go into the theater... and then all of a sudden everyone wakes up. Isn't there a part like that in friggin' Last Man on Earth, or I mean the Omega Man with Charlton Heston? I think
could have been Omega Man.
It's good stuff, man. So
the zombies in this are kind of unique in a lot of ways. They're not your class. They can be kind of like, they're almost Land of the Dead type zombies, where they're very much attached to their previous lives. You can see there's that like shadow who they were as they are wandering around.
That's another Romero homage right there, is where they're standing up on top of the school and talking about how maybe it's like some memory of the life before that keeps them coming back here type thing. And that exactly happens in Dawn of the Dead. On top of a roof.
And of course that ends up eventually and I agree, Animazing. I do agree with that. But we'll get to that, no doubt.
Yes.
But I do that being tied to their life ends up being a major plot point later on, and I thought that was really cool where they when they did that. But so I know, Dave, you've been kind of cutting in and out on us. Is there anything you want to throw in?
Well, where are we in the story?
We're just after getting Miki. We're right at getting Miki at the mall.
Yeah, the mall.
Okay. See, Miki is my favorite character out of the whole bunch.
I really did enjoy her.
She was an interesting character. I was getting some like lesbian vibes off of her, and again, when she like fell into what the lead girl, the other lead girl's breasts from on top, she was like, oof, and then she like stayed there for a moment, so it was like, but. Other than that, I mean, I enjoyed her. I mean, did you realize that she was reading a Stephen King novel at one point?
Yeah. Stephen King. Not sure which one she's talking about when she describes it later. I guess I missed that one.
Right. She wanted to she wanted to read the original adaptation just to see if the ending's different.
She read the translated one, which props for that.
It looked like the girl who
and I'll admit when she said, "Oh, I finally finished that book," I was sitting there going, "It took you that long?" But then I was like, "Wait a minute, she's reading in the original language." Okay, good on
the apocalypse. I mean, it stands to reason there's shit that's happening off screen that we're not seeing. I think it would take all of us a little bit.
What was it?
It looked like the girl who loved Tom Gordon. I said it looked like the girl who loved Tom Gordon or something like that.
Could be. I still need to read that.
Yeah,
because that's the cover.
I mean, they could have just been genericing it up too. Like they just put the cover as a reference, but then the book was supposed to be so totally different because it just didn't ring a bell to me. But there is Stephen King shit I've not read. So.
And then, well, yeah, and also just if you're talking about like the idea of references and homages, I mean, arguably King's best book is The Stand. Arguably, sort of his magnum opus is like The Dark Tower. And you got one where a virus wipes out most of humanity, and you've got a small band of survivors. And then the other one you've got where the world has moved on. Both of those kind of apply here.
Right, for sure.
So that's kind
of this whole mall sequence is told like in bits and pieces over time because you get a little bit here, but it's all mashed in with the whole mega, the whole when Megan, whatever her name is,
Magumi.
Protected, Yeah.
It was. I really did feel like seeing that scene, and that really was a show of how emotional the series can get, and even if you're expecting it, how it can still come. And when you get the one that you weren't quite expecting at the end, which we'll cover that at the end.
Yeah,
because I'm sorry.
I'm going to be honest. I thought they were all going to die, and it's partly your fault, Brandon. You are the worst person at making people expect the worst when they're watching something.
I love that. I love it. You should be proud.
I agree. Animazing said he was a big King fan, and I am a very slow reader, unfortunately, because I usually have to reread the same page like 10 times if I'm reading something for enjoyment. When I'm reading a scientific article, I've actually managed to figure out how to do it, the speed reading, but you don't want to do that when you're trying to enjoy something. And
what he's trying to say is if he was in Mickey's position, he'd still be reading the damn book.
Oh, I would. I'd be still in like the first chapter, and it would be
working his way through. Right. Well, it's those apocalypse books, man. You got to make those last too, because you can't just run down to the library and check out a new one on a whim.
So they did go.
You have to go through for that.
Yeah, they did do that library. Library thing. The scary.
All the manga I was impressed with all the manga that they seemed to show in the library.
Yeah, that was a good chunk.
Well, Japanese school would probably have a lot of it.
Right.
At least at that. I don't know how they would. Again, I would like to see what a Japanese school library would look like.
Right.
Just be curious as to what they would do, because manga, in a way, is kind of cool for like basic reading, but at the same time, a lot of times the culture looks at it as more trash reading when it comes to like scholarly. So
there's a lot of that stuff that you're going to have in any library. I mean, we had stuff in my high school library that was straight up trash. I mean, but it's some of the stuff like the manga I've been reading the last week has been Silver Spoon. That's got a lot of educational value,
Really does.
Good stuff.
You read Yuri Camp, you could go camping by like learning. You can use that as a how-to manual. They even include like recipes in them sometimes, I think.
And I don't know anyone's mentioned this yet, but Animazing says Megumi forced herself to stay below. Amazing willpower. Indeed. It was. But anyway,
the whole mall sequence really is like the moment in the show, because prior to that it's all been this slow burn, like yes, there's this sinister shit going on, but you will find yourself by that point kind of wondering, like, I wonder if they are going to do some actual zombie action. And I think this episode probably, or it's a couple episodes I think where they're at the mall. That whole thing, it really kicks it in the ass in terms of like the action and the zombie combat element of the show.
And it also plays in another element that we haven't really touched on, but it's an important one in the show. It's kind of interesting in a lot of ways. The show has echoes of Haruhi Suzumiya, because in a lot of ways, I don't know, Mo, have you gotten into that one yet? It's classic Yatu. Well, in that one,
I know Anime sort of likes it on occasion.
Oh yeah,
I know the
I
character
know he's
because
a
of
fan,
Roger,
yeah.
for sure.
Well, so the reason I mention it though is even though Yuki and Haruhi are completely different in a lot of ways, one thing they have in common is that they both, without trying or being aware of what they're doing, basically dictate the lives of everyone around them.
Yeah.
Because Yuki is not trying at all to do this, but in order to keep her on an even keel and keep her from falling into utter despair, all the other girls are working overtime to make her delusions workable. But also, she incidentally comes up with really good ideas. Like she woke up one day and said, "We need to have a field trip."
Yeah.
And Kurumi and Ri look at each other and they're like, "We need supplies.
Well,
Let's do this."
Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah.
I was going to say, and by the way, yes, I agree. Mo should watch Haruhi at one point.
Yeah.
At least the first season. Second season.
I'll get around.
But be aware that the second season gets repetitive, and some people hated that.
Well, people who had to watch one episode a week and hoped for a lot more story wise. But
I really need to crack this bad boy open and actually watch it all. I've never seen Nagata Yuki-chan. One day.
Yeah, see, he knows it. Endless 8. Yes, exactly. But yeah, that's the thing is this she actually did this. I think the first time I wasn't quite catching this, but the second time I'm thinking that's part of her ability to perceive reality. Is she? I think she's actually looking at this and helping in her own way.
Yes,
because there's a subconscious part of her that does know it's real. That part of her that goes to the doorway right where she ended up making her last stand and dying, Megumi, and so she knows what's going on. There's a part of her that does.
Yeah, at least subconsciously, she is thinking, of ways to, help her continue this delusion, but also in a way that's doing what they need to do. Because Kurumi says as much to Miki. This is a good lead into our next episode, which I believe is called Welcome. Yeah. Pretty much, this is them welcoming her into the club and giving her a tour of the school, even though she went there too, which she says a couple of different times. But basically, she tells her, Yuki's delusions might be an issue. They might make a little extra work for us, but that extra work also kind of sort of keeps us sane. And she also always seems to know what we need to do.
She was the hope, as they even say it. They say, in case you didn't get it, as we were going through, we're going to slap you in the face with it. She gets threatening with her, like, "Don't you dare let her."
Yeah, she is like clenching her fist and shit. But she's got the right mindset about it, Miki, because she's coming into this situation and seeing like this can't be a healthy thing. Just letting this girl run around in this dangerous situation, like suffering from delusions. And she tries to, I think, kind of convince them that maybe they should tell her about it, and they convince her in turn to just sort of wait on it a bit until you know more about Yuki. Once you get to know her a little better, you might understand why this is the best option right now, kind of a thing. And so that's what they kind of go about. I think they have their sports festival, isn't it?
Right.
And they play some good games that actually look like fun classroom shit that we used to do back in the day.
They do a pretty good job of fitting in all, checking all the boxes for a high school anime. You got the field trip, you got the sports festival, you got the swimsuit episode, you've got the what's the other one I want to say? The camping episode.
The camping one, and they go shopping as well.
Yeah.
So what they need left is they need to do an episode with a what was that thing that they do? The school festival, culture festival that they do.
Right.
They always do that in the high school, but that would have been a harder one to pull off, I think. Yeah, actually, they could have done it. I'm sure
Mhm.
I could see that in a longer run, especially something like, say, the manga or something that I could see they do it. I don't know if they do that, though.
Well, since you
Um,
brought it up, the manga is obviously considerably longer.
Yeah.
It's 12 whole volumes, which I think isn't it typically like a chapter or two for an episode when they adapt them into sometimes like
It
3 or 4
depends.
tenths.
It depends.
Yeah,
But
it depends.
typically one volume is going to be several episodes of the show, you know. And on the wiki, it lists the whole cast of like the kids or the college
Mhm.
people at the university.
Oh yeah, the challenge. Was it bravery challenge or whatever? That's one that was mentioned here.
That was one
they
that
did do.
as well.
Yeah.
But anyways, obviously in the manga, the whole cast, there's like a whole club at this college that's going on as
Mhm.
well. So that could be potentially a second season of this, or in the very least, I've heard it's worth reading all the manga because a lot of it is
Mhm.
fairly drastically different in the way it plays out in the manga as well. Certain characters that didn't get as much character development in the manga ended up getting more in the show, and vice versa, from what I remember.
I mean,
Oh really?
a good example, like something like that, would be something like. Actually, I'm gonna pull myself on full screen to show this off a little bit. Like these, say, like K-On! Good example. This was an entire run of like what would be considered, I guess, 2 seasons, like 20 some episodes, and a movie. And the format is very basic style. I mean, it's only the basic 4 to 8 panels without any major like story.
Right.
So it really depends on how they adapt it. You can
Well, that's what they call a 4-koma. That's not your typical full blown manga. And that's more like a comic strip that gets turned into
exactly.
So it's a little bit different in terms of. And now, Mo, I'm curious. You said that they changed a lot of this from the manga in terms of the overall story or the characterization, or.
I think several elements of both. It's from what I understand, pretty drastically different experience. I mean, there is obviously the parallels between the two, but obviously we get a much larger cast in the manga as well. There's a dude. I'll try to give you guys the link after this, so maybe you can throw it in the comments or in the description of this. But there's a dude who did a really good like series of videos on the show because he got mildly obsessed with it, and I can relate. Where he broke down the music and the differences between the manga and kind of individually reviewed each of them as well. And he brought like some music professor guy on for the music breakdown and stuff. It was pretty neat. But yeah, it's there's a lot more of it to take in with the manga, and there's substantial differences.
And I agree with Amazing. It does need a second season.
Yeah, and the show does leave it open for a second season.
I mean,
they definitely
even K-On! Went to college.
Yeah, but we didn't get that anime yet. One day
we need this on the anime, and we need this one too as well.
Well, I mean, if they do a second season, though, I don't know if Mickey's going to be able to get admitted because she was advanced a grade on Yuki's authority, and I don't know if that'll hold up.
I guess under on rather extenuating circumstances, as it were. Or they could always take her on as a mascot or something because they seem to do that a lot in those.
One of the things that bothers me about it, but also I can understand. Of course, episode 9 is the swimsuit episode, and they do set it up in the mall, which I like. I do like how they do that. They are excellent at their storytelling. They're very good at just setting up the characters in the story. So there's nothing that's like comes out of the blue if you really look into it. But that I admit, I think it was Yuki. That's the book reading one, right? No, that's
Mickey.
Mickey. They show her in her underwear more than any of the ones out there, which I kind of find like. Okay, the garter belt that she wears over there, and I'm like,
right. I mean, there is that element of it. Sometimes they play it off more casual than others, like when they're giving the dog a bath. I mean, most of the stuff that in another anime I would have found to be kind of pervy. I didn't get that vibe in this, including the swimsuit.
I don't know
Played
whether
off
they were.
much more. It's played off much more casually than it might have been
Yeah.
in a lot
I
of
don't-
other shows.
I don't know whether they were trying to say she wears that because she's more mature emotionally or something, but I don't know. But
Maybe.
the swimsuit,
I'm going with that they did it to just appeal to a certain demographic of viewers there.
the swimsuit episode is funny because I was trying to get my wife to watch this show because I was speed running it through. I watched the first 9
Yes, it is.
before I stopped and took a break. And
Razor says it's a brief
she, of
calm before
course-
the real storm.
yeah, exactly. And she comes in on the 9th episode, and that's her first impression of the series,
Of course.
which is
You know,
totally
I will-
you know,
There was one thing I took issue with. The way they treated the idea of how easy it would be to throw all these fish in buckets for an entire day while they cleaned and chlorinated the pool and then put them back in chlorinated water. No.
they didn't chlorinate.
I call
it.
bullshit on that.
They may
Kurumi
have-
specifically says they didn't
Yeah.
chlorinate it because
Yeah, they
Yuki
didn't.
says something
I
about
thought
like
she
this
said they
doesn't smell
did.
like a pool. No, Yuki says this
Oh.
doesn't smell like a
I'm
pool,
a-
and Kurumi's like it smells like that because the chlorine.
Yeah, they
I
weren't
might
gonna-
have misread that. Okay.
So the
It
fish
sure
were
looked
safe.
like
them
they
in buckets. They did
Don't worry,
put them
the
in buckets.
fish were okay. The bucket.
They
part
did
might have
sit in the
sucked.
buckets all day, and that was kind of iffy.
Hey, I
But,
bet you trout like
other
still
than
alive
that-
in the cooler when I got home, so it could
Yeah.
be. Some of them. I imagine a
I
couple
don't-
would have floated to the
Mhm.
top when they dumped them back in the.
Keep in mind,
Probably.
it's not necessarily a complaint for me for episode 9. Yeah, I do agree because of how dark those last 3 episodes were.
Mhm.
You needed a happy-go-lucky episode to start
Mhm.
because those last 3 episodes.
Well, and even the last I think it was episode 10 that had one of my favorite lines in the entire series, which was that one where I posted the screen capture, and it was like Yuki is looking as serious as she can at Teramaru's bowl. And of course, you find out very quickly that there was a very real, dark reason for this. But at the time, she was looking intently at Teramaru's bowl, and Miki's like, Senpai, again, I told you you can't eat Teramaru's food.
like she's tried before, you know. That's great. I don't know, man. That's you know, since we're on it, the whole swimsuit episode, it definitely. I think it's easy to look at that as pervy because of how it would have been done in most other anime.
Yeah.
But when you really
Yeah.
watch the episode, the subject
Oh.
matter, what they're talking about
And-
for most of it is very
and
serious. So.
because most Americans are prude when it comes to that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I
Right.
mean, they're also underage girls we're talking about here. But
True.
Yeah.
Like, okay, when the whole
Sure.
thing with, like I mentioned at the beginning, you know, Risan's got some knockers.
Is
man.
that when they disappear?
oh, okay.
Maybe.
So Dogbones disappear from the title during. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I did notice that right around that time, I think it was episode 10, where Teramaru makes a different appearance in the end credit sequence.
yeah.
And that was kind of an interesting, or the 10th or 11th episode. But yeah, that was kind of interesting how they changed that up. But
And I will make a contrast here between this and High School of the Dead. And High School of the and I hate that nurse.
heard so much about that.
You wouldn't be able to do it. Actually, no. You're usually able to hold on to the gore with anime, but let's just say as a live action series, you wouldn't be able to do it, man. There's a lot of like flesh ripping and stuff like that.
I did appreciate how they jaked all the zombies and the violence in this so that he could,
And of course,
you know, it was all like,
It's-
made
in,
sort
in
of.
terms of appropriateness for an audience, it could have been this.
God. But I mean, like I say, High School of the Dead, it was almost half of the series was the ecchi portion, and this was like one episode, really.
Right.
So
And it's
I
clearly
can't
like,
really.
like we said, it is put in there to appeal to, you know, a certain taste, but it's the way it is actually portrayed is very natural and casual.
Yeah.
And that's what I was talking about, you know, because obviously they make a point, even and there's like a dog bone bounces off her tits in the intro. You know, Risan's got some heavy hangers, bro. But the way that they portray it through the series is not like they're always glorifying it. There's a couple comedic moments where stuff happens with it, and the focus being on them. I read into it as, you know, how actual high school girls might focus on their friend that has bigger boobs.
Exactly.
You know? It's not like a pervy thing. Yeah. It's just very casual and natural, like, you know,
and again,
high school girls.
Yeah. And that's the way it contrasts, like I said, with something like High School of the Dead, where you do see a lot of that. You see a crap ton of it. I mean, there is an entire episode that revolves around them taking a shower together in the bathroom, and the guy's perving on them, which is a typical thing in anime. But a lot of it's just about, but not when it's supposed to be a horror anime about zombies. It turns off a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Even in zombie movies, nudity isn't a common thing. So when you know, because when you really think about it in terms of actual horror films, there's not like tits and ass and Dawn of the Dead.
That's if you were sitting there like
thing.
I mean, if 45 minutes of like a 90-minute zombie movie like Dawn of the Dead was just them like taking showers and having pillow fights,
it'd be a little lame.
It would probably.
I want to see zombies, man.
But with that, I mean, this one did it tastefully and as tastefully as you can do it. So, and before we get into the final part, there's also an underlying government conspiracy.
Yeah. Oh, no. Okay. You're talking about the same thing. Because we did kind of gloss over that in lieu of the swimsuits, which I don't know if helped our point there with that.
and actually, again, this is something to do with Yuki's timing, because she came in with the idea that we need to swim, we need to clean the pool the day after the three of them had stayed up all night, just completely wigging out about this. What am I trying to say? This revelation about the emergency bunker, you know, and the potential meds and all this kind of stuff.
Well, see, and we lead into that with Letters, which is the episode where, you know, she's chasing Teromu around. She ends up eating shit by the cabinet, and she finds this box full of all these, like, you know, stationery. So they decide they're going to write these letters, these hopeful letters, and send them out with balloons. We get the amazing thing where Kurumi is trapping the pigeon, like one of my favorite things in the entire. She's like, I'm just gonna beat it with the shovel. Then she has the cage.
But then it won't be able to fly.
Right? Then she's like, with this cage, we'll be able to kill it real quick. And then I think that's when she said, I can't fly. It's dead. And then they end up arguing about the name of the pigeon, which is just such a great comedic relief moment.
That one did bring a little bit. That did kind of give me a little bit of because. As an environmentalist, as a conservationist, I consider it a terrible blot on Americans that we managed to drive to extinction an incredibly common bird, the carrier pigeon. And these girls obviously were not aware that it was extinct, or they thought any old pigeon would do or something, which is kind of comedic in a sense, but it also irked me a little bit to think like, that's... But it did. But Kurumi's methodology, the whole idea of we could kill it real quick, I'm just like...
Hey, I'd be eating pigeons like crazy in the apocalypse, dude. I mean,
what's that?
Indeed, World War One. Yes, and amazing.
Those gutter chickens probably taste pretty good when you're starving after a while.
I bet. And I will admit, when we do manage to trigger the zombie apocalypse or whatever other apocalypse we trigger, the common city pigeon is probably going to outlive us.
Yeah, a lot of crows too. I'll probably be eating several of them. As many as I can catch, you know.
So Megumi is definitely was it Megumi? Yeah, I think it's Megumi. Was the one that was central to that finding it because she had left that key behind.
Yes, and they found that in the cookie tin full of the stationery that was on top of her cabinet. And Mickey kind of pockets it at first because she doesn't want to alarm everyone right away. She figures it probably is best to bring it to Risan because she's like the den mother. so they can actually think of like the best way to handle this. And that's when it leads into what you were mentioning, where they pull an all-nighter looking around for this thing. And once again, Yuki is the one that comes through. She finds a dope, like weird sleeping bag and a nice little plushie and head thing. Photos right there.
But then she also finds the secret compartment, which no one else had even thought to look at.
Right, and that's probably part of her goofy, curious nature, just touching everything that she found this cool hidden latch. And inside is this basically fail-safe case, you know, like it's in there is emergency instructions that they were supposed to receive in the event. They weren't supposed to open this until something went down. And inside of it is these evacuation procedures, this list of supplies and medicine, things of that nature that, you know, they're kind of in a disc that I don't think we ever get to see what's on the disc, because they've started having to conserve power at this point, I think.
Yeah, because they were looking at they were thinking about how odd it was that this school had an awfully large amount of resources, like solar generator with a whole bunch of long-term batteries for storage and all this other stuff. It was just
they had a fish pond. They had nice gardens, rooftop gardens, nice gardens. The solar panels and the batteries and water purifier.
It's all set up to be a city within its own little city, basically. And the students are the citizens, and they come to that realization before they've even found this emergency box. They're already starting to think of how convenient this all is, and it is, you know. And then later, obviously, we get turned on to the idea that there might be more of these, which is cool, and just begging for a second season. But they, you know, we'll cover it when we get to it. But I think they did leave it off at a good point where if there wasn't any more of this, I'd still be satisfied with how it ends. But, you know, basically this kind of does sour a little portion of their pool day or whatever, because they're still thinking about this as you would. You found this crazy implication that there's like this government conspiracy to hide or, you know, deploy chemical weapons potentially that would turn people, or biological weapons, excuse me, that would turn people into these things. And it even says shit in there like, what is it? Sympathy and something else are no longer like good traits in society or something. It's dark shit. We don't even what little tidbit we see of it is enough to make it like some sinister implications there. And then when you think back at the beginning, all right, yes, it could have been 2 or 3 simultaneous explosions in that first episode, but I don't know what the odds of that are. Because if you remember when they first show, like, or not the first episode, but when they show that episode where they show the zombie apocalypse kick off, there's a point where they're all up on that roof and you hear this explosion, and then it shows like 3 spots that are simultaneously like billowing smoke in the center of the city.
Now,
maybe a coincidence, or maybe something was dropped right there to like push this along, you know.
Let's say, Animazing put in there, there were community safe centers made by the government to help humans survive. Now, one thing, I did not read the manga, so I'm probably dead wrong on my theorizing. But did you ever wonder why it was like, because the Japanese, they do have a defense force, and they do have American military bases, but yet there was no presence of helicopters or anything throughout.
No one came to help them.
So
that's one of the most sinister parts of it.
You got to wonder, maybe maybe when they were talking about nothing coming, you think to yourself, like, you could see the military just like cordoning off the city as an experimental zone or something, you know.
Did anyone else get an idea from the show? Or Mo, reading the manga, did you get an idea from the manga about exactly where this takes place?
Magumi Sakura High School, if that's a real place.
Right.
I actually haven't read the manga yet. This is just what I grabbed on Wikipedia before we got in here. I didn't even realize that there was like a list of characters for the college until I was, you know, getting ready for this.
I was just kind of curious. I was just kind of curious because the it could be like if it's maybe on one of the smaller islands, like Kyushu or Shikoku or whatever, that maybe they just cordoned off an island to use as an experimental zone. And
Yeah.
it's possible. I doubt they would have done it on Honshu if it was an experiment.
I
But
felt like
could
it was
be wrong.
worldwide. Like, I don't know why I got
Oh,
that
okay.
vibe, because they made a point to talk about, like, is this just in locally or is this just in Japan? Or I don't think it's spread worldwide yet. So just the fact that they dismissed it outright made me think, like, okay. And, you know, possibly it's some sinister shit that goes beyond just Japan, like it's some worldwide population reduction efforts, you know, because they did talk about how, like, building back the population was a main priority in that document that they had, you know. And there's a brief moment of them thinking, like, what the fuck, Magune knew about this the whole time and just let it happen to it. Not that she could have done anything. And I'm glad that they clarified that, no, this box has been in here for ages. Like, chances are they didn't know anything about this because they never opened the box.
She did know about the safe areas, though. She knew about where those were because she actually went down there herself when she was dying to write her final words. I'm actually kind of sad that they didn't find her her final letters, because she was writing them, I think, for them to find, or for somebody to find anyway.
Miki saw them, so she could tell them about them at least.
Yeah.
So I guess we could go ahead and hit the final 3, which
I guess we lost Dave. That's too bad.
His internet was like, let me see, there was a message on there, but I think that let's see. No, that's not Dave. But I think his internet just got like real shaky.
Yeah, it could be.
I have to let my cat out real quick, dude. So, you know, just give me one moment and we'll dive through.
That's all right.
Not a problem. This is why, though, I'm kind of glad that I have physical media, because if my internet would go out, I could, and it does. Actually, there are times when my streaming is choppy as all get out.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I'm just like, hey, well, I can, like I was watching Arrow the other day, and I'm almost through season 2. And
nice.
There's only a couple more episodes left to catch up to the entirety of the Arrowverse. Just a couple.
Yeah, just a couple.
I did. Yeah. As you can see, I did actually refit this into a.
Oh, very nice.
All right. Well, so last 3 episodes. Take it away.
Well, pretty much, you know, as we've covered, they end up finding this panic box or whatever, and they learn of this underground, you know, area to the school. They're thinking about raiding it for supplies at some point. And pretty much Toromaru goes missing right as we're leading in to like this sequence of rainy days, at least a couple.
They call 10 a rainy day.
I think they only... Yeah. I think they mention it briefly, or maybe in this episode, but I feel like they mentioned it once prior, that they actually have to like flock towards the door when it rains. You know, the zombies. Go ahead.
They have a picture. They have a picture of the scene I mentioned, the one where she's chastised for eating Toromaru's food. That's that exact. You see Miki's expression there.
Right. She's at it again.
As Animazing say, yes, the Cloud is not trustable. Amazon or Netflix could remove any title they want. Yes, they could.
Yeah, they could.
But any case, go on ahead.
Oh, well, anyways, Toromaru goes missing. It turns out he's made his way down into this, you know, evacuation area underneath the school, which seems fairly obvious. I mean, you could just, in theory, convince people it was for tsunamis or whatever, earthquakes, whatever Japan has going on over there in any given, you know, weather season. So it's just kind of there, but none of them have ever went down there. So Kurumi, who volunteers to like search the lower levels for Toromaru, ends up having to run down in there and find him. Now, there's a lot of zombie activity at the school during this final sequence of the series because it's raining. And like I said, I think they mentioned briefly prior that they do seem to like clamor to the school when it rains, you know.
Well, they've mentioned that they don't seem to like getting wet. and that
Right.
they do seek shelter.
Well,
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's about that reflection of their normal everyday life.
Yeah.
I mean, they normally clamber into the building when it's raining. But it's also
Mhm.
reflects
Sure
the
enough.
time, because the last time it rained like that was the time that Megumi died.
Yep.
But
and that's
it's
when-
also, and I was going to say that was another important plot thread of this episode is while Kurumi's on her expedition, Ri is actually filling Miki in on what happened the last time it rained, and yeah, it's pretty dark stuff.
Yeah,
and
pretty
you
much
finally get-
extended
yeah.
rain means bad
Mm-hmm.
news with the zombies because they're all trying to flood into the school. And so,
Mhm.
Kurumi does eventually find
Mhm.
Toromaru, and unfortunately, he's been turned.
Yeah.
She manages to kind of herd him into a closet with some ping pong balls, and then she
Mhm.
realizes the person who turned him was Magune. Like, she's been down
Mhm.
here the whole time in the guts of the building, keeping her. She
Mhm.
clearly sequestered herself away in the one place they might need to get to, which is incredibly inconvenient. But she locked herself away to turn zombie down in the basement of the school. So she was still protecting, even in death, the girls from
Mhm.
herself. Kurumi goes in there, I mean, I think most of us would have done the same thing to try to put her out of her misery so she's not just rotting down in this basement. But she chokes, like, right as she's about to bash her brains in with the shovel. And she ends up getting bit. So pretty much at this point, they all kind of make their way back to the club room, and they're like, we can't find the little bastard, and then Kurumi comes wandering in all messed up, and they kind of start trying to treat her while simultaneously the barricades are basically getting ready to give. Miki can't handle the fact that Toromaru's out of it, so she goes and just starts reading through the panic case documents and stumbles across the list of like these medications and things like that are down in there and various supplies. And one of these potentially could be like a thing that could stop this process of Kurumi turning into one of these zombies. At the same time, Ri's kind of juggling with this promise that she had made to her in, I think, the mall episode, or the one that followed, like the bulk of the mall stuff, where she promised that, if it ever came to that point, she would put her out of her misery, because Kurumi was especially hung up on this idea that maybe there could be some consciousness trapped in these people after they've been turned into these zombies. So she's, considering doing that. Miki has taken it upon herself, since Kurumi's out of business, to like take the shovel and head back down into the depths of the school to retrieve this medicine. She ends up doing a service and putting Magune out of her misery, and she obviously retrieves the stuff as everything's kind of coming crashing down around them. I think at this point, they had met up she'd met up previously with Yuki, who's like kind of huddled in the club room or whatever, or just a classroom, I don't remember what it was, trying to figure out what to do.
She was in the club room,
she ends up having I think they took her back to one of their corridors or something like that for the.
Actually, no. If I'm remembering correctly, Yuki actually snapped to and showed some foresight and got Miki to the club room, and they were barricaded in there. But then Miki decided, I need to go. You should stay here. But but this was one of the. This is one of the parts where also you kind of skipped over Yuki. One thing we also find in this episode, I think it was this episode or the 10th episode, where they mentioned that Yuki really had her break with reality after Megune's death. She had barely hung in there until then.
Yeah,
and she really had that. But that was the thing that kind of she couldn't handle, and she's been skirting around it ever since.
Right. There was a period where the club was just a fun distraction, and Yuki was in on that fact, it was, like pre Magune dying,
It was
Mhm.
also the 10th episode was the episode where she noticed the broken glass for the first
Right.
time. And she actually, I think the 11th episode is where she finally came back to reality, but had to
Right.
face her fears.
Yeah, she starts
Mhm.
to when she finds Miki and she helps her to the club room as Mickey's like,
Yeah.
attempting to get down there to get the serum. And
Mhm.
pretty much like she kind of retreats back into her shell for a minute there and is
Yeah.
just cracking because everything is going terribly wrong all around them again.
Mhm.
And, probably the rain doesn't help, paralleling that day with Magune back when it all went to shit. So she eventually has to have this whole kind of conversation with Magune where Magune helps her get to the broadcast room. And, she kind of has to say her goodbyes to Magune because she's realized that, like, I'm just really making a lot of problems for people not being able to deal with this and help as much as I could, So she kind of finally sheds the delusion. And that is probably one of my favorite moments in the series is when she says goodbye to Magune outside the door. And then she walks through and she cries momentarily and her tears are dripping down into Magune's blood. And then she snaps out of it and, does her thing, man.
Because she opens the door and it's like nobody is there on the other side.
Right. And there's some good symbolism there with that bright, like blinding light for a minute as she comes through it. Like she's finally out of this haze of this delusion that she's been living in. And she almost gets immediately killed because she's not strong enough to swing the bat hard enough to kill the zombies. And that's where Toromaru comes in and saves the day, saves all of them, literally, because she was about to get killed for sure.
Yuki, I remember even saying that, not Yuki, it was Miki even saying, how could she swing around the shovel so much like she does? I can barely even hurt these things, let alone because they were relying on her to be their muscle the entire time.
She's like, she was carrying this around all the time.
That weight of that shit, and it's such a good moment there too, because even us as viewers, you kind of take it for granted. It's like, well, why don't they all have weapons? They could just all be, have some good weapons on them all the time so they can actually defend themselves, but she was strong enough to do it. And then, when you get into the real reality of that too, it takes a lot more to shatter a skull than you might think. I mean, they're resilient,
when she's holding out her hat, and of course the dog was always after her hat and trapped them in there. I swore she was going to snap the dog's neck. because
that would have been my favorite moment in the show if that happened.
You've seen a lot of these types of movies where they're like, I'm really sorry, and then they have to end the suffering. And it was just like, oh my god, they're gonna do it. They're gonna kill the dog off fully. Little did I know later on what was gonna happen, but then they go into the kind of hopeful thing where she gets on the loudspeakers and takes advantage to what they know. These people, they can actually hear and understand a little bit. They can understand some basic things, and she was able to basically say, it's graduation time. Essentially, it's time to go home.
Well, end of the day,
exactly.
Go home.
So it turns out all they had to do was the end of the day announcements the entire time.
Right. I was like, that is a creative solution.
Yeah, just do it and then shut the gate. And they could have been fine the whole series, But no, that was great. It's super uplifting because she gives that whole speech about how much they all love school, and even though she doesn't like things about it, it's like it is kind of the hub for Japanese kids. I think that's something that we've lost somewhat here in the States. That still is a thing over because that's their whole life when they're that age is going to school, man.
Studying.
Yeah, see, when you're not going to regular school, you're going to like cram school in the evening and shit, and you're just always around your friends. So it's like they're full-time students over there, whereas here it's like if kids even go to school, they, it's not quite the same thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that part really always kind of chokes me up at the end of the show there. And then when you see them all actually listening to it too, it's like you feel bad for the zombies, which I'm always down for a good zombie narrative that makes you actually kind of sympathetic for them. Because I always feel
yeah.
bad for him when you see him just shuffling around, and then when you like that whole part in
Yeah.
Dawn of the Dead that they mirror in this, where it's like, oh, it must be something that's left inside of him there that remembers that this was their place, you know.
It's really sad because there's that piece of who they were is still there, that shadow. Yeah. But of course we get to that end scene where they do manage to get the cure, and they administer it to both the dog and to and to the other and to the human that got bit, and it looks like things are gonna be all right.
Yeah, it sure did for a minute there. It's but see, the thing is too, when that whole speech is going on a little bit, the whole speech when that's going on, we don't actually ever see him give her the serum, so we don't know that she's for sure made it back yet. So you're getting that whole idea that there could be some consciousness left in these things really hammered home, as the girl who that was her biggest fear was being left fate is still up in the air, you know. Like, hey, welcome back, buddy. So I thought that made that especially powerful too, because the whole time she's given that announcement on the speaker, I'm thinking of like, you know, or at least the first time I watched it, I'm thinking, man, like they for sure are conscious in there somehow, and this girl might be left that we don't know what's happened yet. And fortunately, they don't kill any other humans.
Hi, Dave.
It was nice having you, buddy. Yeah, we arrive at that scene where, you know, and it's absolutely adorable, where Kurumi wakes up and she's like, shh, you know, but Yuki's too excited and just blows the thing. As you would be, you know, she was right on death's door. I mean, she even had her fucking face covered with the sheet and everything. And she had the butcher knife out, like, ready to do her in. So they obviously did this just in the nick of time. And so she survived, but unfortunately, in Toromaru, we think old Toromaru is going to be okay too, because he's like, he's weak, you know, but he's getting out of the box and he's like seemingly happy. He tries to eat and hacks up a little bit, and that's when you know that this is probably bad news. Thankfully, he did get to have like one more happy moment with Miki right at the end. You know, she gives him a little water and he yips at her, and everything was cool. And he passes away, and then we have obviously his sort of funeral that they give up there, where they bury him next to Magune, and Yuki gives probably the best sequence of dialogue, I think, in the entire show, where she talks about how, you know, it's okay to just be sad. You can't just push away all the sad stuff in your life, or else you'll end up forgetting the important stuff. And she had forgotten Magune's last words, which kind of get pieced together in these final episodes here. And she learned, you know, she remembers that at the end, Magune's last words were that she was glad she got to be their teacher and stuff. And she tells him, you know, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be sad when you're sad. It's all right. It's okay, or it's all right to not be all right, or whatever she says. And it's, to me, that's kind of the message of the whole show, kind of condensed into that last little bit of it there. Like, yeah, you can hide in delusions and it might make things okay for the moment, but eventually you're going to have to face them, and you run the risk of losing parts of yourself while you're lost in that delusion, kind of a thing. And she replaces the bow on Magune's, you know, cross, because it had been, I think, burnt when shit was getting straight crazy. We just glossed over.
And actually, we kind of glossed over that. Lightning struck the top of the building, and it set all their crops on fire. It set all their crops on fire and a lot of the zombies.
Yeah, and I love that it hit right when the zombies were wiggling it. Like, it's a weird, you know, zombies do weird shit sometimes, and they're wiggling it. It hits the lightning rod, and they're like, the part was amazing.
Right. But that basically kind of forced their hand, because you're right. Once they could get them out and close the gate, they could have theoretically hunkered back down. But with all that stuff gone, they knew that the clock was ticking, and they had to do something.
Oh, they had to.
The lightning rod fell and like pierced their friggin' generators and blew those up too. So then the power goes out, and we get that eerie part where all the emergency lights come on while Miki's down in the evacuation area getting the serum and shit. But that final funeral there, man, I mean, that was like a good send off to the characters. You know, they bury little Toromaru out there, and she puts her signature hat that she's worn the entire series that he was after in the grave with him. And they kind of set off to new horizons, basically.
Well, I like how she asked Mickey's permission first. I like that.
Well,
true, and they do the graduation ceremony. But what were you saying?
Graduation.
And that was
I like how Yuki tells all the zombies go home. You know,
yes,
that was an interesting moment there.
Right. You kind of faded out when we hit that, but I was like, that was one of the more creative solutions that I've seen in a zombie movie.
Yeah, some people take issue with it, man. I mean, they think that it's like a cheap way out of it, but I thought it was super creative. Sorry, Brandon, what were you gonna say?
Well, I was saying that was what makes this series kind of special when it comes to zombie series or school anime series, is that it did.
We lost Mo this time.
Mo was like, "Screw this, I'm gone." I mean, that's what makes this very different from a lot of those types of series, and even like your standard zombie fare is it does differentiate itself. It sets itself up to be something different, and that's what I think is unique and special about the series in itself. It was to me, it was just it was great there. Now, when they did that to the dog and the way that they had it and the way that the dog finally made up with Miki at the end, and you think that the darn dog is going to live, they had me. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but they had me in tears killing that dog off. I thought they were going to pull them all through at the end.
I had the feels.
There's several portions of those last like 2 or 3 episodes there that choked me up repeatedly, like every time. It's been effective, and like I said, I've been through it 4 times, and it holds up. You know, it's because they build the emotion so well throughout the series, and there's moments where they build some crazy tension out of nowhere too that I really kind of sunk into this time. Or how many moments where there's like this huge rising like crescendo of like crazy tension-inducing music, and then it just goes silence and cuts to like a seemingly normal scene afterwards, you know? A great example is that first kill that we see Kurumi make with the shovel, where she's like screaming and it's just all building to this thing, and then just nothing, and you're back in like the club room, I think. And so they do a good job of making you like never really sure, because I, like you said, you know, it feels like Toromaru is going to live, but I didn't trust her, because we thought Magumi was dead in the ground, and turns out she wasn't buried up there at all. They just buried. I mean, it was a small plot for a full-size human woman, though, I suppose.
I know that you guys probably glossed over this this section, but I really liked the moments when Miki was not really believing her delusions, Yuki's delusions as of yet, and she could clearly see that that the rooms were all bloody and shit like that. And
it's a great touch.
She just went on like school didn't even exist. Or
what do you guys think of the graduate? Go ahead.
Oh, that's she considered school still existing and living in the normal.
Oh yeah,
well, hey, that's one heck of a club.
Sorry,
it was really cool to see her take charge, like at the end too, man.
Oh,
because Yuki turns out she was a pretty strong character underneath all that, you know.
Before we wrap up on it, I thought about it. We missed one thing, major thing. The club.
The club.
Because they
the
were
all living club?
Yes, the school living club.
Yeah.
The whole concept was formed around the idea of having something to grab onto, and then was used later to be something to help keep Yuki from running off going home.
I thought it was I thought the club was created because of Yuki. Because Yuki believe these delusions.
No,
It
she
was
was she definitely was conscious that it was a distraction at first.
Yeah.
I think it was Magumi, like knowing that these kids would need something to ground them during all this. You know, they needed something to occupy the time.
And actually, initially, if I remember correctly, it was partly to cheer Ree up as well, because Ree was having serious difficulty with this whole thing. And it was, but yes, once the whole thing happened with Megune, where Yuki lost her grasp on reality, it became a way to not only keep her cheerful, but again to keep her in school. Like there were a couple of times where she mentioned that she almost forgot about club and was getting ready to go home.
And went home.
That was like,
you could see that moment where they just kind of look at her for just a minute.
Right.
You're like,
yeah. And it was kind of,
I think one of the best moments of character, or I guess we saw it happen, so it's the conclusion to Miki's character development through the show is kind of during that graduation ceremony where she gives that speech. They decide like they've got to leave the school now, as Jake mentioned. They don't have all of the amenities they had before, so they're gonna have to go find a new place. I forget which one of them brings it out, but there's this map where Magune had marked with the little bear symbol, which I thought was adorable.
Right.
She marked like this location these locations on the map. One of them was like some factory or something like that. And they have a very real conversation about, choosing basically in a way that parallels this, that they've got to choose what they want to do after high school, work versus college.
It was let's say it was a good series.
And they're very realistic about the fact that
So what's that?
What happened?
Oh, I thought Brandon was trying to say something.
Oh, I thought your internet went out.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, anyways, basically, they're fixing to set out to one of these locations, and they kind of have their little graduation ceremony as their last official activity as the school life club. And Miki gives her whole look at her character. She starts out very afraid, and she's just sort of content to stay shut away in that closet in the back of that clothing store or whatever. Develops into a pretty tough character by the end of it, so she talks about how much she learned from all these guys and that whole thing. And Yuki kind of gives a little speech that hits a little less hard, given that she basically gave a similar one while she was making the announcement. But it still kind of drives home this idea that they've all came a long way with this, and they've got tons of possibilities out there ahead of them. And so they head off to one of these locations. I don't know if it ever tells us which. One of my favorite moments in that whole ending sequence was where they talk about how the people at wherever they're going might be worse than the monsters that they've dealt with, which if you've seen Walking Dead or most other zombie stuff, it tends to be the case. I think that might have been a little bit of a hint at a possible second season there, as well as what we see after the whole road trip montage, where we see someone actually find one of those letters that they let off with the balloons earlier in the series.
Right.
Yep.
And you also, I believe, I want to say Animazing alluded to this early on, but as they're leaving, one of the zombies looks awful lot like Kay, and it's kind of...
well, she would look better.
Yeah. And that was kind of a sad little moment there too, but kind of it answers a question that was hanging over the whole time. But
or possibly, I mean, we don't know that she didn't live. That could have just looked like her and made her think about it. But I mean, that's kind of the fun of the show too. We never really told the answers to certain big questions, like what exactly this was. So it leaves the fun of speculation open. But I don't know. What do you guys think about just the way they wrapped it up here? I mean, is it one of those things? Because I took it as being very satisfying, even if they never did continue it. Because, yes, obviously there was much more they could have done. So, well, sort of, I would say that if they had left off the part with the person finding the balloon or the message at the end. because that kind of makes you think they're going to meet someone else, but you have to watch through all the credits to get there. So
Right.
Yeah, I think they thought there could have been a second season, but at the same time, I think it's good that you can wrap it up there. I mean, I feel like I can be satisfied with it. In a way, I think that's better to have a series end in a way that leaves you semi-satisfied, but thinking to yourself, I could definitely enjoy more. Series like, say, The Simpsons that go on, or The Walking Dead that go on and on and on and on, and you're just like, but if you're like, say, like Gravity Falls, good example, series that had 2 seasons, really solid story. You could have more, and you might be happier with more, but darned if you're okay to be able to have those episodes you had. It's like a great thing.
Yeah.
Well, and we may mention earlier of When They Cry. When They Cry is a good example because you gotta have the first 2 seasons, and then they should have quit when they were ahead.
I need to watch more of the new series to get a full idea. I still feel like it was unnecessary.
I haven't seen the new one yet, or a couple of the spin-off ones. Like I never saw Kira, I never saw Outbreak, and I've never seen. I think the new one's called Who. Yeah.
Animazing actually commented the anime ended right, open-ended for a possible second season, but also tied up in loose ends.
Yep.
Killing
Guys was yes.
It's one of those things where, like, I found myself fine with that being the end of it, and even if they don't do more, I can just imagine other adventures they could get into. Knowing now that in the manga, though, that we do actually get to know all these people at this college and stuff, kind of makes. I mean, I'm for sure going to read that, but it does make me hopeful that they'll at least give one more season on this.
It also opens up the door, maybe if not a season, there's a possibility, depending on how the manga goes. I haven't read it myself, but maybe a short OVA or even a movie or 2 movies, that could possibly be one way, But I admit, it is one of those ones where, to me, it reminded me of something like, say, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid or something, where they're heading out into the unknown, and it may not be a happy ending, but it gives you the possibility that, it's not definitive one way or the other, or something like Sideways or something like, those kind of things where you really don't know that it's a happy ending, but you really don't know that it's a tragic ending. And so it's what you bring to it. And that can be a really fun way to do it. That can be.
Oh, yeah.
It would be nice.
And especially, again, given the things that I was led to expect by Brandon's ill-advised comments, it had a happy ending compared to what I was expecting.
You were thinking the worst from my comments. I just said it got really dark in the last 3 episodes to watch them. You want to watch them all like together because it would be really hard to watch one at a time.
Well, I try to do that. I with most shows, no matter how piecemeal I watch them, with most shows, when I get to the end, I want to hit the last 3 to 5 all in one go. I don't like doing it. That's usually
to do.
The manga then has not come to North America, huh? Oh well, that would.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, so I feel like I did read. You gotta find some fan trans of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm sure there is.
Are readily available. No, there
What's
is
that one?
for sure.
Manga Bat or whatever it is.
Manga Bat is the one that I use when I'm not just reading off Shonen Jump or something. It's got a good selection, and a lot of them are really well done translations, it seems like.
Well, I'm looking forward to, apparently my library has orders in for the next volume of several of the ones I'm reading, so I'm looking forward to that pretty soon.
Hopefully this kid, the attention it deserves. It's a few years old now, but it's young enough that you could be forgiven for not having stumbled on it yet. I don't know. I guess a good way to close her out is just, if you guys want to pick favorite character, favorite scene, and then we'll hand her back to Brandon here, and he can do his closing ceremonies there.
And as a answer to the question for the last of those, the vodka is upstairs, but that'll be for tomorrow.
Oh, no. The vodka is where you find it.
Yes. So, in any case, I do appreciate y'all for this wonderful discussion. I hope that you all enjoyed this one. Next time, Dave is going to be leading us with a series, one of these three, Kurozuka, the red one.
Shirozaka.
And
I even know how to.
So then,
it's a very interesting vampire tale that has to do with one of the main focal Japanese heroes. I found out at the time that I was watching it first. So when I finally go through it, I'll probably go and do my research a little bit more.
I'll probably start working on these as I get through one at a time. They're not they weren't high on my list, but now I have them, so it'll definitely be there. So that's something to look forward to at the end of February, which is going to be the February the 22nd, which is not that far away if you think about it. But of course, I do thank everybody for coming in here. Of course, my co-host Jake. But we also have Mo from Drunken Master Studios, and if you haven't checked them out, you should. Some really fun stuff there. And then, of course, Dave from Inside Movies Galore, which a wonderful discussion group, which tomorrow we're going to be wrapping up a fun movie discussion on that channel, and we do a Kubrick twofer that is there. There's a pre-show on Delusions of Grandeur. Is that still airing under the Inside Movies Galore YouTube channel, though?
Yes. All episodes for Delusions and Inside Movies Galore are still airing on the Inside Movies Galore channel.
So as far as that is, so we've got those for Kubrick, slightly different than what we're covering right now. 2001, A Space Odyssey, and A Clockwork Orange coming up. So some fun stuff there as we talk about Days of Future Past. And to wrap up, I don't know who has the largest manga collection in the group here because I've pared mine down quite a bit over the years. Might be Jake. I don't know.
Not huge.
But so with that being said, we will see you all on the next one. Goodbye.
All right.